Welcome. Thank you for tuning in. You're listening to the Beyond 50 radio program. I'm Daniel Davis. On the program today, we're going to be talking about harnessing the power of attention to heal the mind and body. Because of today's wonderful advances in the neurosciences, we're beginning to understand the power of our mind. And the difference between how we think and feel is usually just one thought away. On the program today, the book is The Open Focus Brain, and our guest joining us on the program is Dr. Les Femi. Dr. Femi, thank you for joining us here on the Beyond 50 radio program.
Well, thank you for inviting me.
Now, nice, The Open Focus Brain. Now, you don't usually hear focus in this particular direction, but generally, this is something that's been known throughout the ages. Tell us how you got started in this particular field.
Well, I noticed one day, I've been in the field for 40 years, I noticed one day that when a person is asked to feel space, say space between your fingers or space between your eyes, there's a shift in brainwave activity in the direction of alpha activity, which is the kind of activity that's associated with alert and mildly focused activity. And it turns out that this particular activity can be trained by simply asking questions about space. So the electrical activity is just a reflection of this intellectual activity. Did I leave you high in the air?
Yeah, just a little bit there. I was just kind of following along with you, and you kind of you get to a point. But I think that's just it, is that, just on that moment alone, I thought to myself, we tend to anticipate too much through our thoughts. And would you say that's kind of, like this day and age, a reason that we tend to create stress?
I keep, the last couple of words drop off for me. Could you say it a little louder?
Yes, what I was saying is, there it is right there, is that I was anticipating that there was a little bit more to it. And it seems this day and age, when we think about focus or thought, that we tend to anticipate sometimes things that just aren't there. We anticipate, for instance, a future that's going to be bringing us maybe results that we don't want or that we hope will be better than where we're at. We anticipate, a reality that isn't real, so we're not grounded in this moment right now. And that usually tends to cause a lot of the stress or the depression or the anxiety that a lot of people experience this day and age.
I agree, and I want to say that the way you pay attention is just as important as what you pay attention to.
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, if your attention is narrow-focused and objective in orientation, the kind that's associated with gripping on a topic like an anticipation, then your brain waves drop in amplitude and reduce in synchrony. And there's a real connection between what's going on in your mind and the way it's going on in your mind. So usually we talk about what are we attending to. I'm suggesting here by this observation that we can attend to how we're attending to these future thoughts, etc.
Yep.
So it's how we attend becomes a critical variable. It turns out that when you narrow focus on things, you are actually causing stress for yourself by the act of narrow focusing and objectifying or gripping whatever it is you're attending to. And that, of course, is not what we want. Now, you could attend to the same anticipation of future activity in an open kind of focus, in which the question or the answer or the subject was in the middle of that, and you are experiencing a vast space all around it. If and when you pay attention like that, then there's a marked reduction in stress, and stress in general is diffused. So whatever piled up stress you have gets diffused. And most of us reach advanced ages just being overly stressed, having accumulated stress, not so much because of what happened to them, but how they attended to it.
Now, that's what I remembered when I was reading in your book, The Open Focus Brain, is especially in the West, we tend to, as you were talking about, have narrow focused attention, that we need to be sure that we're hyper vigilant on, having focus that's so direct on, you need to get focused. You need to pay attention. And I think that becomes damaging after a while. I know many years ago, as I worked in the food service industry as a waiter, that I tended to go about my task with the nonchalance of though I was walking in the park. And for me, what I was doing is I was basically expanding my awareness to the point of paying attention to everything that was going on, but in a very relaxed way, which allowed me a pace that was very leisurely. And there was one point where I was reviewed by the management, and one of the things they said was, you tend to have a pretty easygoing, slow-paced manner about you. You don't have a sense of urgency. And I looked right at him and I smiled and I said, then how come I have the time to help all of my other team members do their work while doing my own at the same time? They didn't have much of an answer for that. Whereas, you'd see a lot of people basically running around, trying to get things done, and they're making the job just look impossible. And I think it was just because I allowed myself not to be so narrowly focused but open-minded, that spatialness that you're talking about, just allow things to be, and everything just seemed to fall into place and made the job very easy.
May I ask how you came to this way of attending on your own?
I really don't know. I think a lot of it has to do with being out in nature and just, opening myself up to listen and to feeling, the sounds around me and experiencing things just sort of coming to me. That's the best way I know how to describe it.
Well, that sounds very good and certainly relevant and one way to get into open focus in nature, as you mentioned. But perhaps your parents also were disposed to attend in a more open way.
Could have been. Now, it's interesting because you came to the open focus brain, I guess, technique, if you will, because you noticed how quick it was to slip by giving the brain spaces to be in. And I found that fascinating because many years ago, as I was reading and studying about Zen, they were talking about Japanese art, and what they tend to do in Japan, anyway, is they focus on the spaces in between the object that they are actually, say, rendering a drawing of, and that's what creates the object at the end. They actually draw the spaces. And I thought that's an interesting way to think about things. So when I would go out, I would tend to look at the spaces, like you're looking at a tree, you look at the spaces in between the leaves. And it's really a different way that you, I guess, attend or have attention. And that's what it seems like the open focus brain does. It changes the way the brain relates to reality in the world. Tell us how you came to this.
Again, the major orientation was I was looking at alpha activity because
Right.
I had such a dramatic experience myself that I wanted to share it with others and help them to that same realization. And the problem was there was no way that I could induce this alpha activity in them. It was kind of met with curiosity, but little success. So while I was looking around for ways of producing large amplitude alpha activity, nothing worked. Beautiful music, a sunset scene, a dewdrop on a rose petal, Um, any number of beautiful images just didn't do it. Like, can you imagine the space between your nose and the wall in front of you, or something like that? So it came out of the realization that alpha activity was relevant to this space experience, and vice versa. The space experience increased alpha activity. So it was a serendipitous event. I didn't make it happen; it just happened, and I just was in a position to recognize its value.
Mm-hmm.
And it took many years for me to truly understand what was going on, and what was going on, of course, was attention change. There are four kinds of attention, as I eventually viewed it: there's narrow attention, there's a very diffuse attention, wide open. There's an objective attention, paying attention to the thing rather than to the space in which the thing is experienced or embedded. And then finally, an immersed kind of attention. It's like when you become one with something, or you love something, you enter into that space. And then various combinations of those four basic kinds of attention was understood ultimately as being a very positive result.
Mm-hmm. Now, Dr. Femi, it seems this day and age that one of the biggest, I guess, if you will, problems that people tend to face is depression. And it's interesting as you hear about it through the media that, there's such general symptoms that just about anybody can feel that they have this. From your perspective and experience, what do you think is the greatest cause of depression? Is there general things that people experience? And, obviously this seems to me to be a reasonable approach to alleviating depression. My best guess could be comparison. The way your lifestyle is compared to somebody else can cause depression because it isn't good enough. As a matter of fact, many messages we experience, for instance, through the media, maybe even through entertainment, tell us somehow inherently, maybe even subliminally, we're just not measuring up, we're not good enough, but here is a product or a solution that can help you do this. I can see how the open focus brain tells us, quit worrying about it so much. Tell us kind of the relationship there with how we experience depression and why it's so prevalent.
I certainly couldn't speak to all kinds of depression. Mm-hmm. There are many reasons for depression, but there is a category of depression that does respond to this kind of approach, so that you can learn to merge with depressed feelings and allow them to dissolve. If you got the book after the one you mentioned, called Dissolving Chronic Pain, which just came out, I guess now a year and a half ago. Mm-hmm. Well, that would describe how you could find a way to experience your depression so that it isn't devastating to you. That is, experience it while you're in open focus. And in fact, by doing that, you allow the stress associated with it, the tension associated with depression, to diffuse laterally, up and down, forward and back. You then experience yourself in a three-dimensional environment in which depression no longer is gripped to, is held onto. Mm-hmm. So by practicing these exercises that are in both books, you can actually learn to dissolve depression. Some people can. We've been very successful here at the clinic. I would say just about everyone at least benefited from it to some degree, but many had a dramatic reduction in depression and even total alleviation of depression. And it's due to the way we pay attention. If we grip onto the depression in a narrow, focused way, we're just holding it. We're keeping it in place. We're not allowing it to go through like we allow many other things to go through.
Now, we live in a day that technology just seems to be overwhelming us. And, people have cell phones now. If anybody uses public transportation, everybody has earphones plugged into their ears. And we seem to be living more and more in a society that, at least I've noticed, that seems disconnected while at the same time seemingly trying to reconnect through technology. This can't really be very good for the brain, could it?
I think that the brain is remarkable in what it can do, and if you're stuck on the headphones and narrow focusing on it, then you are actually creating stress, even if it's something you like some music you like. If you narrow focus on it, you're gripping in a very direct way to your experience, and that will get you the accumulation of stress over time. In fact, since we've been born, we've been urged to pay attention, and of course they mean narrow focus on what you're doing so that you don't lose your place. But on the other hand, pay attention could mean open and immerse yourself in your experience. Now, if they're listening to the beautiful music and allow that music to go through, the experience of that music to go through because you're paying attention and open focus, then no harm is done and maybe some good would be done. But if they're narrow focused, as I said, the chances are that their experience is a stressful one because they hold on and they grip to what they're listening to or thinking about or feeling or tasting or smelling or a sense of time anxiety, for example. Time anxiety is just the result of narrow focusing and gripping your experience.
Anxiety, now there is a big one. I like the quote that comes from that particular chapter: anxiety is the state of 20th century man. Everybody seems to be anxious to be everywhere and nowhere than where they are. And boy, there sure is an industry out there that's helping to address that for profit, isn't there?
Yes. Yes. In fact, it's the nature of our world that it is gripped, it is narrow focused, it is stress producing rather than stress reducing. And I think the book has had a great deal of interest for a nonfiction book. It's already sold over 20,000 copies, and I think because it rings some bells about the world we live in and about the role of attention in creating the world that we live in.
I know, Dr. Femi, it was quite fascinating. I remember as I was reading The Open Focus, I really liked this because it kind of affirmed to me personally, as I was describing earlier, that really opening or expanding your consciousness to just kind of feel and experience everything, which to me I feel the human body was made to do. Now, narrow focus is phenomenal, especially when you consider how it's applied. For instance, you could be an emergency technician. Somebody happens to be in a trauma state, you narrow focus for a short period of time to be able to help alleviate whatever is going on in that moment with, in an emergency situation, you have firefighters, there's another one. So, narrow focus is a great thing to have, and inherently we're built to do this. But it's just so unnerving to me to think that, that especially in America, that we need this feeling of that we need to do this in, our regular jobs. And I don't think, and as you say, it's really not very natural to sustain that kind of focus for long periods of time. So there is a contrast. If you can, for our listeners, share the contrast between, the essentialness of narrow focus, I'm sure I touched on a little bit, and how you back off and how obviously too much of it causes a lot of the problems that we experience.
Yes, and you said it well. We do need.
Well, no,
now.
You did in your book.
Pardon?
I said you said it well in your book. I was just repeating it.
I see. Well, you were smart enough to recognize the right part of the book to mention. So we do need narrow focus. It's not that I'm trying to suggest that narrow focus should never be entertained. I would say that we're overdoing it, though.
Mm-hmm.
In other words, certainly when you jump out of the way of a bus or something, you might narrow your focus for a bit of time. But now, if you said, "Oh, what if that truck, what if a bus hit me, and what if I would have broken my legs, and what would my children do?" And you just carried it forward,
Right.
And of course, in narrow focus, and that would be the wrong thing to do for sure, because all it would do is accumulate stress in your system.
Mm-hmm.
So we want to have attentional flexibility. That's at the bottom. That's the heart of the most positive result. Being able to narrow focus when it's important, take the first opportunity to broaden your awareness and let that go through, and enter into experience. Like if you're interested in a love relationship, love is not a narrow focused kind of thing. It's more an open and immersed kind of attention. So certainly interpersonal relations have their preferred attentional orientations, and say a prize fighter. Mm-hmm. Although a prize fighter might actually have, in some ways, some of the same attentional styles associated with being intimate with any experience, like loving an ice cream cone or and merging with that ice cream taste is a little more narrow but intuitive kind of experience. So you have an opponent, and you're narrowing on the opponent and his actions, and that's a kind of attention or attention style, and it's not it's not only open. It allows, say, the punch to arise within oneself and be deflected or hit its mark. So did I get near where we were?
Yeah, you did. And what was interesting about what you just said is just yesterday I was thinking, for instance, about Muhammad Ali, and for some reason I was thinking about boxing. And what I really loved is I grew up watching Muhammad Ali, and it's interesting to watch him today if you can catch the old fights as they're broadcast on a sports channel. Is Muhammad Ali had such a unique fighting style because his hands always seemed to be down by his sides when he fought. You see a lot of boxers today, they tend to be covered up and basically, kind of always on guard, getting in there for the attack. But Ali just had this very relaxed style. He made it look easy, and you could never figure out, except for the fact that it was probably due to him being relaxed, that he allowed the opportunities to present themselves through the mistakes of his opponents to basically lay him out.
Yes.
Versus these other guys that cover up and they go in there and, they're all protected. And to me, it just seemed that that's probably what made him a great fighter, was the fact that he did seem to be so relaxed while he was in the ring, that he could pull the narrow focus at moments that he needed to, and at other times he just relaxed. And to me, it sensed that he was just conserving a tremendous amount of energy when it just wasn't needed.
It's probably true in every sport that the best of them are attending in particular ways that are ideal for that sport, for the abilities of the players, and I just read an article the other day apropos of the Japanese art that you mentioned earlier, and they did a study about how to hit a golf ball from where it's teed up to the green, and three groups were used, and the first group kept their eye on the tee when they were swinging to reach the next green. The second group kept their mind on the green they were trying to reach, and the third group was asked to attend to the trajectory, the space between the tee and the green.
Wow!
And the people that were most accurate were the people who envisioned the trajectory of the ball, and they got closer to the hole. So this space thing comes into. I'm just learning tennis now. I'm 78 years old, and I'm just starting with tennis, and it's really remarkable how even in tennis I don't pay attention to where I'm hitting the ball or that I'm hitting the ball. I just attend to the trajectory of the ball as best I can. And I had 10 group lessons, and the teacher said, "You picked this up very quickly."
It's kind of neat to have the relaxed mind. Again, for instance, you mentioned golf, and certainly many of us, if we've been out on the golf course, when it comes to tee up, we just want to hit that ball with everything we can and drive it into another county. And it would always be fun when I would be with my brother, and we would be out golfing, and he golfs quite a bit. And he could always say with accuracy as after the swing, you were trying to kill it, weren't you? As he would call it. He says, just relax. Trust me on this. Allow the swing to happen and keep your eye on the ball. But I like what you're saying, too. Focus more on the space between where you are and where you want to be. That slips the mind into a whole different way of being. I'm sure it almost delights in it. You would think.
Let's see. I was thinking of what I was going to say to you, and then I started listening to you. I forgot what I was going to say. But in any case, the problem is having the right kind of attention. So when you spread your attention from tee to green, then it's you're a different animal than if you were narrow focused on the green. So, by the way, in the back of both books there are CD exercises, and I recommend that if you're going to play golf with your brother again, do one of those exercises, especially the general open focus exercise, and do it, say, a half an hour before you go out and play, and then see what happens to your score and what happens to your whole style of golf.
As I remember taking my son out many years for golf ago for the first time, and I said, my son's name is Dustin, and I said, your whole goal today is to get that one Zen shot. And I sort of had a Zen thing going on at that one time. And I said, if you get one of those today, then this whole game has been worth it. And he says, what's a Zen shot? And just as he said that, it's almost as though God was listening. You hear the screaming and hollering off in the distance. And I said, that's a Zen shot. And if you have one of those, your score doesn't matter. Nothing really matters with that because that's really the only thing you're ever going to remember anyway. And it was like I was describing to other people. The Zen shot isn't one that actually goes in the hole, although that could be one of them. But it's just a particular shot that maybe you thought out and it worked exactly the way you wanted to or better than you thought it would.
And with less effort.
Exactly. Fascinating stuff. Now, let's talk about the exercises themselves. Very simple and straightforward, and the beauty for the listeners out there is these are exercises you can literally do anywhere at any given time. Would they be ones that you could recommend, or can they be done, let's say you're on the drive to work and you're stuck in traffic?
Well, as a disclaimer, I suggest that no one does the exercise while they're operating a vehicle or are in any kind of dangerous situation.
Okay.
So otherwise I'd be happy